For the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's community conversation regarding the potential temporary alternative shelter site, which may be located at Southeast Gideon Street. My name is Cody. I use he, him pronouns, and I will be facilitating today's conversation. I'll share that while this is a likely location, we're still in the very early stages of this project. No lease has yet been signed, though we are still looking to move forward with the project. We really want your input. That's what we're here today to do. We're here to, share some information about the site. We want to introduce you to the key players. We want to meet, stakeholders and continue meeting folks that are in the neighborhood. And we really look forward to hearing from the community, particularly residents, business owners, and other folks who, regularly use the site that this is potentially going to be located near. Just a quick overview of today's agenda. It's pretty straightforward. We're going to provide a brief presentation, and then really the goal of this conversation is to hear from you guys. So just so you guys know, the meeting is being recorded. We will upload the meeting to our website for future reference. Because this is a presentation, we're unable to give everybody recording privileges, but we'll share it up on our site afterwards. The goal of this conversation is to provide information on the proposed site. So we're going to have an overview of the site. We will share how it will be managed. We'll share what services will be offered. We'll share security and safety measures that will be put in place. And we're going to talk about the next steps in the process, including how community engagement will move forward. After I provide this short presentation, you'll hear from the mayor and you'll hear from our service provider. We'll move on to the Q&A function, and you'll have two different ways that you can engage with us. First, you can raise your hand and we will call on you. We'll get to as many folks as we can that way. Or if you'd rather type in your question, you can use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of the page. These questions will be sent to us and we can publicly answer them in real time. I want to note that while I know some media folks are here, this meeting is really geared towards the community, and we're not going to be taking media questions at this time, but you can always follow up in our media inbox. You guys should have that from me. Just a few rules of conduct while we're doing the Q&A portion. We have to unmute you, so if you raise your hand, we'll be able to click on you and unmute you. When you're asking a question or providing a comment, we ask that you state your name, and if you're representing an organization, please state that. We want you to limit comments to a degree, just that we can have other folks participate, but we're really here to listen and engage. So make sure that, we'll give you plenty of time to get your input out there. We will be, cutting folks off if the conversation becomes overly disruptive, if there's, abrasive language or things like that. We're here to take, critiques, and we want to hear your real honest input. But we want it to be done in a respectful way. If someone is being overly disruptive, we could mute you or permanently eject you from the meeting. So we hopefully won't get to that stage, but those are some protocols that we'll have in place. We just really want everyone here to feel welcome and respected and safe in presenting their opinion and thoughts on this project. You can go ahead now while we're doing this presentation, by the way, and add some Q&A questions. If you click that button, you can also raise your hand. So once we get through this, we'll have some questions already ready to go. Let me just quickly introduce you to the panelists that we have here today. We have Mayor Ted Wheeler. We have Skylar Brockernap. She's a senior policy advisor for the mayor's office. We have Dr. Lena Miller from Urban Alchemy. She's the CEO. We have Kirkpatrick Tyler, or KP, from Urban Alchemy. They'll be joining us here on the call. They're in the conference room. We also have Director Mike Myers, who is the director of the Community Safety Division, but he's also the incident commander of the Street Services Coordination Center. Just for additional ways to engage, we have a website, portland.gov/wheelers/shelter-sites. This has a plethora of information that you guys can engage with. It also has a Q&A. As always, if you have any follow-up questions or concerns, you can always email us at mayorwheeler@portlandoregon.gov. A very brief overview here before we pass the torch. These are the city's temporary alternative shelter sites brought forth by the mayor. We're looking at up to 6 planned locations across the city, all in different diverse locations. Initially, each site will have up to 100 tents for up to 150 adults. These are adult camps, not children camps. Shelter placement will be through a referral-based system. So there will be no walk-ins allowed. Our engagement teams that regularly meet and engage with folks, that need a place to stay. This will be one of the options that we can provide them in coordination if they would rather go to a congregate shelter, a Safe Rest Village, or one of these temporary alternative shelter sites. They're all going to work together in tandem. And for these sites, we have about a 3-year lifetime. If this extends past 3 years, we would have to get further approval. Just some basic site elements. They'll be provided with 2 meals per day plus snacks. These will have electricity, they'll have restrooms and showers, laundry access, community space, a pet area, storage. They'll be near transit and transportation options. We'll have Wi-Fi, a perimeter fencing, and regular trash collection and hazardous waste removal. Urban Alchemy was chosen after a competitive bidding process to be the service provider for this site. Urban Alchemy has a great wealth of experience running shelter sites. They already run numerous sites in California, and they also have a congregate homeless shelter in Texas. Urban Alchemy will manage the site 24/7 with approximately 15-to-1 staff to client ratio. We will also use a built for zero client-centered public health approach to guide clients through the continuum of care. Service providers, so Urban Alchemy will engage regularly with surrounding residents, clients, businesses, neighborhood associations, and enhanced service districts. So today's meeting is really just starting the conversation. It's starting our relationship with the neighborhood. Site policies for this site. There will be no strict time limit regarding the length of stay. Weapons must be checked at the entrance. This is a zero tolerance policy. Alcohol and drugs cannot be consumed in common areas or public spaces. There will be no cooking or fires allowed. This will be a referral-based system. I mentioned that earlier, so no walk-ins and no guests. There will be neighborhood security and safety services. There's going to be a 24/7 hotline staffed by the service provider for complaints or questions about the site, or if you identify some perimeter issues. Urban Alchemy will patrol a 1,000-foot perimeter 16 hours a day, every single day. And there will be no camping within 1,000 feet along the perimeter of the site. The next steps in this process, we have another meeting on Thursday, the same time, 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. We've heard from a lot of folks in the community who want us to develop a good neighbor agreement and make sure that we have some metrics in place that we can track together. These are data points. These are measures of success that we can determine whether this is going to work or not. So these are all things that we want to work on together. With that, it's just a very brief overview. I'm going to pass the call over to Mayor Wheeler just to share a few words with us. So Mayor Wheeler, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, good. Hey, thanks, Cody. And thank you for everyone for being here today. Obviously, this is an issue of great importance to the community. It's obviously something of citywide importance, and I appreciate seeing so many, actually hundreds of people on this call tonight. And this is in addition to a call we did on Friday. I also participated in a community forum on Saturday where this wasn't the only topic covered, but it certainly came up. And as Cody indicated, there's also another opportunity on Thursday for people who could not make it to one of those other sessions. I don't want to go on endlessly. I think people have heard a great deal about what the broad vision is here, and there'll be opportunities during the Q&A to further refine it. But the bottom line is this. There's nobody on this call who does not understand that the homeless crisis is the most significant social issue facing the city of Portland. There's two major components to this. I talk about this and I listen to discussions around homelessness between 10 and 12 hours a day. This is by far the number one issue that I'm engaged in personally, that the office is engaged in, and frankly, City Hall is engaged in. The homeless crisis intersects so many other aspects of city government. But there are two things that we're hearing from our community. The first is they want their public spaces restored. They want to be able to walk down sidewalks unimpeded. They want to be able to access parks. They want their kids to be able to walk to school without concerns about walking through a homeless camp. We have people who live with disabilities, who are very upset that they sometimes have to navigate in the streets around tents that are blocking ADA ramps or public right-of-ways. And it has become a concern to the community. And there's no question that it creates economic, public health, livability, and public safety issues for the community at large. However, that's not the beginning and the end of the story. For the public, they are also deeply concerned about the state of affairs for people who are relegated to the streets, particularly people who are in any one of the 800 unsanctioned homeless camps spread out over 146 square miles in our city. And what they're telling us is they want a humane solution to address the causes of homelessness and connect people with services to help them get off and stay off the streets. This model is intended to connect people with services. It's intended to do it at a scale that we can actually remove large numbers of people from the streets and into better circumstances. The camps themselves are an improvement. They're hygienic, they're safe, they provide basic dignity to people who are otherwise living in dangerous and squalid conditions. But more importantly, what we're trying to do here is create wraparound services that homeless individuals themselves tell us they desperately need to be able to permanently get off the streets and transition into housing. That's behavioral health, substance use disorder treatment, basic healthcare services, access to case management. We intend to provide all of that through this model. And for those who are on the call who are really concerned about the livability piece of this, we can't fix that if we're not also solving the homeless crisis through programs like this. And this is frankly a gap in our delivery of services. We all agree that housing is critically important to getting people off the streets, but for a lot of people right now, they're experiencing an emergency and they're not getting any help. A recent Oregonian poll indicated 95% of people they polled on the streets said they'd never been approached for access to housing or to shelter or to services of any kind. This allows us to bring services closer to the people who need them, with the goal not just of having them stay in a camp, but actually transition them out of the camp and into better circumstances. So that's the focus here. That's probably all I need to say. And I think we're pretty close just to getting to the Q&A, which is what the real show is here.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm also going to have Urban Alchemy, who's joining us in the conference room. If you guys would just like to introduce yourselves and share just a few brief words before we move on to the Q&A so folks can get to know you.
I'm Dr. Lena Miller. I am the CEO and co-founder of Urban Alchemy. The doctor is in psychology. The doctorate is in psychology. And really what we've done is to create new kind of forms of villages, as we call them, based on psychological principles, mostly around trauma, around healing, recovery, and really infuse all of our staff to have the same level of understanding and compassion, and understand that, you know, that part of psychology that is really impacted by the trauma of living on the street, but also the psychology of recovery. As they mentioned earlier, we have several sites in California, different types of models. We have what's called a few VTCs, where people live in their vehicles, where people live in tents, congregate shelters, hotels, what else? Tiny home villages. And so we're looking at a few different kind of models that are really based on what works for the individual, because you have all the different kinds of people out there, and we're really looking for a model that works for them. And so right now, like I said, we're really trying to revolutionize this space. I think everybody in this country, I think we're all gotten to the point where it's overwhelming us, and we're having to build this system and build this infrastructure, and to do it in a way that really emphasizes healing for people and stability. So that's really what this model is. We have a few different models within the model. I think there's some places for people who are living in their vehicle, tents, and is there going to be some tiny homes, if I'm not mistaken? Yeah, so we're trying to figure that out, but really to make sure that people who are living on the street would prefer to live in the new camp that we're creating, our healing center. So with that, I'll pass it on to my colleague, Kirkpatrick Tyler.
Afternoon, everyone. Kirkpatrick Tyler, Chief of Government Community Affairs for Urban Alchemy. Just excited to be a part of the work that you all are doing here, and looking forward to having some conversations with all the folks that are on with us tonight.
Hi, I'm Jeff Dickey. I'll be the Director of Operations for Urban Alchemy for the Portland area. I'll be helping set up the villages and manage them.
Great, and thank you guys so much for being here today. If the community has questions directed towards you, we'll point them in your direction. So just a reminder for folks, we have two options to connect. You have the Q&A function down below where you can ask a question, or you can raise your hand and we will call on you. I'm going to just go ahead and bounce back and forth. We're going to start with the Q&A function. This question is one that we've been receiving a lot. I'm going to click on it here and answer it live. This one says, I'm wondering why this is being placed so close to schools. It's also on a safe route to school. How can we ensure that students will feel safe? I'm going to pass that one over to the mayor if you are okay addressing that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an excellent question, and it is one we get asked a lot. And I will tell you, the most recent email in my inbox that came in just a couple of minutes ago came from a concerned parent in a different part of the city who is concerned about unsanctioned homeless encampments near an elementary school. So this is already an issue across the city. We know that there is a safe route to school immediately adjacent to this proposed site. We will absolutely work to ensure that that is a safe route. There's a lot of different things we can do, but the first is we want to acknowledge that we know it's there. That route has to be clear and it has to be safe. We're willing to look at different strategies with both the school and the community. It could include crossing guards, it could include monitors, it could include other types of security measures. But the bottom line is, with this camp being located there, 1,000-foot perimeter around the camp will be monitored and kept safe and kept clean and clear of any problematic behavior. And if there are other sites in the neighborhood that people are concerned about that fall outside of that 1,000-foot perimeter, we're also interested in that. We're not trying to be exclusive or extremely precise with that 1,000-foot perimeter. But as you know, I take school safety seriously. Earlier this year, I signed an executive order, so I didn't even have to go through the council or suffer bureaucracy to clear all of the safe routes to schools throughout the city. And it's a priority for this encampment to make sure that that route is kept clear. So it will work with you in the neighborhood. If there's things that we're not thinking about that we should be in terms of keeping that route clear, let me know. I will also tell you that route has been problematic even prior to us discussing this encampment. So my personal view is, with the safety protocols in place, with the patrolling and monitoring, and if we can work with your neighborhood on some other strategies around guards and whatnot, crossing guards and monitors during school hours, I actually think it will become more secure, not less.
Thank you, Mary. This question, I think I'm going to direct towards Urban Alchemy. This has been asked by James Bloom. He says, what is the procedure for checking weapons and drugs? Urban Alchemy, if you can take that one.
You take that one, Jeff.
So our procedure, we'll have a table set up, one entrance into the village where folks have to check in with staff. we're asking folks not to bring weapons into the village. We're not searching them, but we are asking them to check the weapons at the gate. So there can be penalties if people are found with weapons inside, but we're not really trying to kick people out of the villages because of weapons. But if they're using them, if they're threatening people, that's a no-go for us.
And if I can, this is a question that's extremely popular, particularly because of kind of our focus around safety and service, or what folks will call security. In all of our sites, our safe sleeps, as well as our other housing interventions, we have a no weapons policy. And really what that means, I think probably the place that we could point to when we transitioned into leadership in the largest men's shelter in downtown Austin, Texas, at the gate, they had a metal detector, they had a bag scanner, and they had armed guards to provide kind of this appearance of safety. And when we went in, we actually removed all of those items because they weren't actually keeping the space safe. The way that we learned to respond to individuals having weapons, one is to understand that those weapons are because there's something outside of that village community that makes them feel unsafe. And so our first kind of approach is to understand and to communicate that inside of the village is a safe space. So there's no need for a weapon. And if there's something inside that makes you feel unsafe, let's communicate through it. Let's identify the issue. And if we can resolve it, to come to the agreement that you'll surrender any weapons that you have right there at the front door. What we've seen in Austin, Texas, what we've seen in Los Angeles, what we've seen in San Francisco is that rapport building, that trust building, and that creating of a safe space, and those community agreements have led to by and large, full compliance for residents in each of our interim housing sites.
Great, thank you. I'm going to do one more question from the Q&A, and then we'll go to the raised hands. Shannon Connolly and Michelle May kind of asked a similar question. They're curious about the walk-in policy. No walk-ins. They're going to be referral based. Michelle May is specifically asking who refers. So I might ask Skylar if maybe you'd be the best conduit for that question, or we'll pass to the mayor.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question. So we're starting with a referral-based policy. It's just kind of the easiest way to start policy-wise, and then we could build from there. But walk-ins could lead to folks lining up kind of around the site, and we're trying to avoid that as well. So we found that referral-based systems work for Safe Rest Villages. They're all at full occupancy, and we have folks who are really excited about getting into those sites. It will be a similar referral policy to the Safe Rest Villages. So outreach workers and then folks who are connected to the outreach process throughout the city and county will refer into the site when there are available spots. So we're developing that process right now. If you have input, if you have some ideas, love to take all of that. Please feel free to email us at it's mayorwheeler@portlandoregon.gov. But we're interested in building this process with the community. That's just kind of what we've seen work the best for the Safe Rest Village program and other programs around the city.
Sky. All right, I'm going to pass it over to some folks that have raised their hand. I'm going to unmute Glenna Hayes. You should be able to speak now, and then we'll go to Jen Tavel. Let's see here. Glenna, can you hear us?
Yeah, hi. My name's Glenna Hayes, and I'm actually the Advocacy and Outreach Coordinator for UCP Connections and Mentors. We are a case management support agency for people over the age of 18 with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We have some extreme concerns around the number of campers for each site. Our community is about 3 to 5 times more likely to be exploited, whether it's sexually, financially, or physically abused. And with their diagnosis of an intellectual and developmental disability, oftentimes their mental health diagnosis is overlooked. The dual diagnosis is not really looked at specifically for our community. So my first question is, how are you going to make sure that your staff are qualified and trained to recognize people who might have a variety of support needs, communication needs, mental health needs, with the sheer volume of individuals at these campsites? I volunteered pretty frequently at the Queer Affinity Camp, the BIPOC camp, and the blended camps that were a lot smaller numbers when COVID first hit. And there was a lot of issues within those numbers of 30 to 70 people, especially around different neurodiversity, different intersectional identities. So we were just wondering, like, how are you going to make sure that people actually inside the camp are being supported and safe?
Glenna, let me take a stab at that first before I turn it over to the Urban Alchemy people. One of the core components of this, I mean, from my perspective, it's great that we're setting up safe, clean, hygienic camps for individuals with running water, toilets, litter, laundry, all that. That's an improvement for a lot of people in terms of where they are currently, but that's not the main point. The main point here is really the wraparound services that you mentioned, and I want to thank you, by the way, for your volunteer efforts. It's critically important. As you know, there's a shortage of behavioral health specialists in the community right now, and that's unfortunately a national trend. But a partnership with Multnomah County is critical to the success of this program, and the chair and I have been discussing what that partnership looks like, and it would include the experts for Multnomah County in behavioral health. So it won't just be the Urban Alchemy folks, it will also be experts providing wraparound services from our community.
Urban Alchemy, did you want to follow up with anything?
Yeah, hey, Glenna, thanks for that question. So there's like 4 tangible things that happen. One, because it's referral based, we actually like to keep really close relationships with our referral partners. And so as a person comes into the site, having connectivity to the folks that are referring them is a really strong point for us. The second is that every resident of a Safe Sleep Village receives a full intake. Inside of that intake, we are able to identify any challenges, concerns, additional supports that are needed. Again, as a part of that intake, we always seek to talk and connect with the providers that are already working with them. The third thing is that our specialty is gap filling. And what I mean by that is so much of our work is predicated on having a strong connection to the service provider community that residents are already connected to. So often in this work, what we see are kind of duplications of services based on every site or organization that a resident is involved in. Inside of our Safe Sleep Villages and all of our interim housing sites, we make a direct effort to connect with all of the service provider partners that residents are being served by while they're staying in a Safe Sleep Village. And then the fourth thing is that for our residents, we're always looking to engage on-site one-on-one time with residents, not for service providers that are working with them. So for example, if you have a resident that you are already engaged with some type of care coordination with, you would have the opportunity to come on site and work with that resident to ensure if there are any challenges or any issues that we can work together to resolve them. And then I would also say that if there are trainings that you think would be helpful because we are new to the community, because we are new to the city, we are always open to have our staff available for those trainings.
Thank you for that. And thank you for that question, Glenna. Let's move on to Jen Tavel, and then we'll queue up Tim McCormick afterwards. Jen, can you unmute yourself?
Sure thing. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yep.
All right. So I am a resident of the Brooklyn neighborhood, and my concern is, we all recognize that there is a homeless crisis in Portland. My concern is that this proposed site, we are looking at between 100 and 150 people. That is a little disconcerting because it's basically putting in another huge, large population. But as we've already discussed in this conversation, the homeless crisis, there's a lot of different elements that come into play, such as drug use and having mental issues that correspond with that, that sometimes lead to being homeless. Why are we doing such a large site and asking the community to absorb 100 to 150 individuals that, yes, are struggling? Why are we not doing smaller sites that, one, addresses their needs, are being able to provide them the safety in these sites, but also, you know, we're not just putting 100 to 150 individuals into a community and say absorb it and it's going to be safe, and we have a 1,000-foot radius of, you know, we're going to patrol this area. Because I can tell you, there's been people, you know, regularly in our neighborhood that are having mental crisis, and when you call for help to have this addressed, it's not addressed. I mean, I've been in my home, I live 8 blocks from this, I've been in my home and someone has been out in front of my home saying, I'm going to break into your home and cut your throat. So I'm really, you know, why are we doing such a large number?
I'll take a first stab at that. Thank you for the question. And that was actually one of the first concerns that I wanted addressed when we started looking at different solutions, different models at scale. And that last piece is the important part of this. We have thousands of people who are homeless on our streets in literally every neighborhood in this community. And we have not done a good job of connecting them to services. The Oregonian did a report several weeks ago. They'd done a fairly extensive study. I have no doubt, no reason to doubt the study, but they said 95% of the people in unsanctioned camps who they interviewed had never been approached for an offer of housing, an offer of shelter, an offer of any kind of service or connection to much of anything. And so the goal here is obviously to connect people to those services in a way that's effective and cost effective, given that we want to be able to serve as many people as possible. The size of the camp, I believe, isn't as important as how robust the service delivery, the oversight, and the accountability of that camp and the people who live there is. And one key difference between this service delivery model and what currently exists is the number of people per individual living there who provides that oversight, support, and accountability. This encampment will be staffed at a ratio of 1 personnel per 15 residents. Typically, it's about 1 to 40. We had the head of the United States Interagency Council on Homeless, the representative from the Biden administration here today. He worked at a shelter that had a ratio of 1 to 100. So we will actually be providing intensive one-on-one support for individuals. They will have case management. The personnel who oversee these sites will be able to keep a closer watch on what's going on within the camp, as well as we've indicated around the camp in a 1,000-foot radius. If it turns out that it starts to cause problems beyond that 1,000-foot radius, and I have no particular reason to believe it would, but if it does, we will account for that as well.
Great. Let's go to Tim McCormick. Tim, can you unmute yourself? And Tim, after Tim, we'll have James Bloom. So I'll put you on deck.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi. Thank you, Mayor and Skylar and Mike and staff, and also Urban Alchemy for this work you're doing, and also for discussing it with the community. I think co-developing with the community and the people affected is really key to making this work and getting to just outcomes. So thank you for that. My name is Tim McCormick. I'm the director of Housing Alternatives Network, nonprofit in Portland. And my question is, for accommodations at this site, we've been hearing the word tent, but might we explore using initially, or perhaps over time, alternatives that offer more weather and extreme weather protection, security, privacy, and comfort than tents alone might offer? For example, tent platforms that also add hard sides and roof, or types of cabin or tiny home, or even movable small housing like tiny houses.
Yeah, Tim, I'll jump in here, and I have sort of some late breaking news that even the folks at Urban Alchemy maybe don't know. So I've been meeting with the governor and the county chair on a regular basis about this and other issues related to homelessness. And the governor has committed that she will seek to deliver and fund rigid pod structures for this encampment. So that's an improvement over tents. Tents will work, and the Urban Alchemy model has been based on tents. But if we can also find a quick way to both fund and deliver pods, that would certainly be an improvement from my perspective. And so we're actively pursuing that.
Great. And if I may suggest, also consider having the community co-develop, design, and build them, which is being done by some nonprofits in town currently.
I love that model, and we've seen it work really successfully, and I would welcome it.
Great, thank you.
And Tim, just so you know, we're having some of those initial conversations. So looking forward to having more of those conversations as well.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. All right, we're going to move to James Bloom, and then we will have, let's see here. Something new, Kathy Astor. We'll put you on deck for the next person. So James, can you unmute?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Mayor, for tackling this really difficult issue. We live in a neighborhood just outside that 1,000-foot radius. Back to my initial question about that checking of guns and drugs. Are they going to be able to? I guess this is a question for Urban Alchemy. Are they going to be able to just check out the gun if they feel uncomfortable? Like, our neighborhood's reasonably safe. You don't need to have a gun to walk around a neighborhood, but some people there might be paranoid for various reasons, might want their gun to walk across the AM PM market or and do some shopping, or is that will they be able to check out weapons and drugs at an at will basis, or will they be locked up for the duration that they're at their residence?
If we ever had a gun check.
Yeah, so I don't know that we've had guns checked kind of throughout the history of our doing this work. The spirit of what I think you're saying is, will folks have easy access to weapons? So we're not going to deny people access to their property. We do a really good job of creating safe environments inside the site. We've done really good, as has been documented, at making sure that the perimeter and the areas around our sites are safe and secure, and that we're good community partners. And we've been able to do all of that without policing people's property.
We have one more question here.
One more question. My name is Jennifer Bogue, and I've been in the Brooklyn area for 26 years now. I've seen lots of change. There's lots of growth going on. People are thriving. The kids are in schools. Everyone is walking in the neighborhoods. We have a lot of different buildings and a lot of, residents right now that have no idea this is even coming their way, that are going to be leasing and or renting these spots in our area. My question, because this has been something that's happened a long time ago, but how are we going to stop other cities to sending people into our cities thinking that this is what's going to help them as we transition these people into these campsites and open these spots for people to camp? Summer in Portland is kind of an open field when it comes to camping and law not being enforced. I just want to make sure that there's a place and process in which other cities cannot start sending people to Portland to say, this is where you need to be because everything's free.
Yeah, and it's an excellent question. There's no great answer to it. The bottom line is people have the right to travel, and they do. But I get the gist of what you're saying. I think what the voters of the metro region passed in terms of a homeless service measure was a good step in the right direction. The fact of the matter is Multnomah County has been subsidizing the entirety of the region in terms of service delivery. So there's no question that people have migrated to Portland for the purpose of getting services. That's what people do naturally. And so seeing the development of those services in Clackamas and Washington County has been terrific. Vancouver has been greatly expanding its homeless services for people who live in Southwest Washington. Ultimately, we don't find a lot of people who have been intentionally sent to the city of Portland. I know anecdotally it has happened from time to time. I don't think it's a significant percentage of the people on our streets, but there's no question if we don't act as communities up and down the I-5 corridor to have some sort of stability and some sort of sense of equity of managing the problem, it does become a situation where some communities are subsidizing others. And I'm keenly aware of that. But by the same token, if I'm going to clean up our public right-of-ways in the city, we've already begun that process, and I'm committed to it, and I will go farther and just tell you point blank, my stated public goal is to have no unsanctioned homeless camping anywhere in the city of Portland. But in order for that to work, we have to provide off-ramps from homelessness. Otherwise, we're just moving people from one neighborhood to a different neighborhood, and that's not a successful strategy. So there's no way to prevent people from coming from other communities. But I can tell you, when I get together with other mayors, particularly on the West Coast, we're all keenly sensitive to this issue. None of us ever want to get publicly caught shipping homeless individuals from one community to the other. The only time we do that is if an individual in our community says, I have family in fill in the blank. Let's say I have family in Des Moines, but I can't afford a ticket to get to Des Moines. Will you help me get to Des Moines? We will. We'll buy them a bus ticket with the agreement and understanding of the specific person who they're connecting with in a different city. But that's a fairly small number, to be honest.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, let's go to Kathy Astor, and then we'll bounce back to the Q&A function. Kathy, can you unmute?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
Great. I'd like to say thank you to the mayor, your staff, and Urban Alchemy for holding these community sessions. I really value being able to ask questions and provide input. I am a homeowner in the Brooklyn neighborhood. I live one block from Powell Boulevard. And I have a very practical question, actually. And part of it is based upon my less than stellar experience with Portland 911. I've lived here in Portland for a year, and it's pretty disconcerting to feel like you have a personal emergency, like a serious health emergency, and be placed on hold. So I do understand, I heard that Urban Alchemy is going to be operating a 24/7 hotline. I presume that there are times when that's going to necessitate some interaction with 911 city services of some sort or another. So what I would like to know, and I don't expect an actual answer today, but I'd like to be able to know when we can see triage and escalation criteria and response time requirements to the various kinds and categories of calls and concerns that are expressed to this hotline and other places. How long are we going to have to wait for a response, and based upon what criteria? So I really look forward as you develop that plan, and certainly you have other models that you've used in San Francisco, LA, and Austin, other places that you've been. But I, as a tax-paying citizen, would like to see that in black and white so that I know what I can expect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so Mike, this might actually be a good one for you. So Mike is actually the former fire chief of both Las Vegas and the city of Portland, and he's been involved with emergency management. Now he's our director of our Office of Community Safety. I'll just say this, Kathy, thanks for the question. And yes, it is unacceptable for people to have to wait on an emergency call for any period of time. And we are addressing that. We're putting in new technologies that help us answer the phones more quickly. We have expanded our 311 non-emergency call line. We expect that to deflect about 180,000 calls per year from the 911 emergency call. And we're hiring more dispatchers. And by the way, it's a heck of a great job. If anybody's looking for an exciting, interesting, well-paying job, 911 dispatcher does require a significant amount of training, but that unit is top notch. They're just overwhelmed with the number of calls that they've received, particularly in the last 2 years, given the number of personnel, but we're making good progress. And that also dovetails with our efforts to increase the number of police officers in our city. And I committed to 300 new officers over 3 years. Just last year, we hired 91 officers and over 30 unarmed public safety support specialists. So I expect that to also help us with the call response time. But Mike, do you have any other thoughts on the emergency response times?
That was a great answer, Mayor. And Kathy, you're right. We're disappointed as well. This has been going on for quite a while. When I, have worked in other jurisdictions, when you call 911, the call just drops in the person's ear at the call taking. There is no hold, and that is the goal of Director Causey at the Bureau of Emergency Communications, is to get to that point. And he has plans to do that. I think the biggest help for Portland is rolling out the 311 number. The bulk of calls that come to Portland should be and are in most cities non-emergency. We've been handling those in the 911 center for years, and that needs to stop. And so the mayor has been committed to staffing a 24-hour 311 system, and that's been up and running. And you're going to see more non-emergency calls be routed that way, taking the load off 911 so the current call taking staff can handle their calls. And then I see Urban Alchemy's hand up, and I think the next big question for all of us has been, what we don't want is to have any setting that we create that has a sudden increase in call volume or workload for police or fire or private ambulance company. And, from general shelter areas, you may see low, what I call low acuity or non-emergency calls more frequent there. And we have, like the mayor's said a couple of times, having the appropriate provider services on staff at those locations to handle low acuity calls, so they're not relying on a police or fire, is important. And we know that. And that's been in discussions with all of our shelter providers across the city, but I'll let Urban Alchemy talk specifically. I assume that's why your hand's up.
So that's a great question, and it's also part of our model. So one of the things we learned very, very early on, even before Urban Alchemy was created, and I was running a navigation center, was that one of the reasons why the public has an issue with shelters is not necessarily the people who live there, it's all the other stuff that goes on. And if you can control the other stuff that goes on, usually you find a much more benevolent attitude. And the neighbors come in and they donate things and they really try to be a part of the community. So part of our model is not just caring for the people and the activities inside the facility that we manage, but also the entire community. Now, part of how we do that is by really doing the work on the front end, by having the director, in this case, it'll probably be Jeff, go out to the surrounding community, and having forums to talk to the neighbors, even sometimes going door to door and introducing himself so people can call and say, hey, Jeff, this is going on. And we do this everywhere, which is why we're called into some of the most sensitive areas where the neighbors really don't want it in their community. And what we've seen is that basically everywhere we've been, the community has changed for the better. And I think the difference is you have a person that's accountable, right? That you can call and say, I need to have this dealt with. And that's not the police that won't escalate the situation or create something else. And when you have someone that's accountable and they know that's their job, and a team of people that that you have a relationship with, who has a relationship with the people around the community, it really changes the entire dynamic. So again, Jeff Dickey. He'll be a face for those of you who live in the neighborhood that you'll get to know. Maybe we can set up something so the community can get to know you. And so when you pick up that phone, it should be immediate and resolved right away. And like I said, everywhere we are, the area is cleaner. There's less, less incidents and everything. I think everything is about the relationship. It's the relationship with us and our guests, and it's the relationship with us and the community. Because like I said, we understand that really the key to the success of these projects is that the surrounding community, we have to actually improve the quality of life for the surrounding community. Once that's done, like I said, everything begins to flow. They good?
That's great. Thank you. I'm just going to bounce around to the chat a little bit here. A question that's been coming up quite a bit is what data or metrics will be used to assess the effectiveness or the success of this project? This was asked by Brian, but also by numerous other folks. Mayor, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I do. And thank you for that. And metrics are extremely critical to this effort. And if there's one area where I think we need to strengthen our efforts around homeless service, it's data collection and data management. So the metrics that I would be looking at are not only what the occupancy rates are, how many people there are, what services are being delivered and how effectively, but I want to know how many people are actually transitioning off the street. And that's partially dependent upon other services that exist beyond this model and housing that exists beyond this model. But we have to collect that data and we have to be honest and transparent about it, because it'll also help our upstream partners know what they need to do in order to plug into this model to make it more successful. We'll also be monitoring data outside of the encampment. We want a good baseline study. How many people are currently, how many campsites are currently in the area around the encampment? And at the end, we want to measure how many are there afterwards. We already monitor crime data. And so we can get a baseline there. We certainly know how much litter and graffiti there is, because we're all over that all the time through our Street Services Coordination Center and our impact reduction program. There is one way you can help us if you want to help us get a complete count of the baseline, the pre-encampment number of individuals or tents in the neighborhood. If you could just go to the PDX reporter and let us know if there's an encampment near you or a tent near you, that'll help us get some baseline in terms of what's out there. We don't have any monopoly on the truth about what the best data to collect is. If there's specific data that the neighborhood would like to see us gather and report on, as long as it's feasible for us to do that and legal, we're happy to do that. In fact, I'd welcome community input on metrics.
Great. Urban Alchemy, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that's
Okay.
pretty robust answer.
Great. We're just going to breeze through a couple more before we take off for today. Alan Combs asked, what volunteer programs have been supportive with these programs? Many residents will want the program to succeed and are willing to get trained or to volunteer their time to this project.
Yeah, so we're always looking forward to partnering with the community. I would add kind of this caveat. Safe sleep sites are intended to be where people live, right? It's their actual home. And so in the same way that maybe you're not as excited about volunteers coming every week to volunteer at your home, these folks probably aren't either. What we are interested in is building partnerships that respond to the needs that residents inside of the site have communicated that they have. Our Jeff and our staff are always focused and working on being present at community meetings, meeting with local community stakeholders and organizations to figure out if there are opportunities on site where services can be provided. Again, where we host regular resident meetings where folks can express their needs. And we're always open to kind of bring those two perspectives together where it's a good marriage. But this is essentially where folks live. And kind of our core focus isn't to make it a volunteer opportunity for folks, but how do we strategically align resources that the community would like to provide with the needs that residents are expressing that they have.
And I'll just mention too, for the surrounding kind of areas, I think the mayor mentioned earlier, crossing guard, maybe programs that we could create because of the safe route to school. But there's additional folks who have already kind of reached out and wanted to donate materials or donate other things. We will be also facilitating that. Just to KP's point, we can help figure out what residents need and help facilitate them getting that. We really appreciate that folks are interested in volunteering and really heartened to hear that the community wants to be involved in part of that process. So we're really looking forward to those partnerships.
That's great. One question that's been brought up a few times is whether folks will be required to go to this campsite. And I think we've mentioned this in a few different variations, but what if folks don't want to move? What if folks don't want to enter the site? Maybe we can answer
So
that
I'll
one.
take that. The answer is no. People are not required to go to this site. We're not depriving people of their constitutional rights. But as Urban Alchemy has mentioned, they have occupancies typically at 100%. People see this as an opportunity to turn things around, to improve their lives, to connect with critical services. I've often said this is really a redemption-based model, which is important. And I also want to stress that this is just one strategy of many. We're still working on prevention measures with the county, rent support and homeless prevention strategies. We still have our indoor congregate shelters. We still have our outreach workers that go out to unsanctioned camps and try to connect people with services or benefits to which they're eligible but may not even know about. And certainly the work that continues to happen, that needs to continue to happen around affordable housing. So this is just one more sliver, but I think it closes a key gap in our delivery. It's for people who will not go to a congregate shelter voluntarily, but would be attracted to an outdoor alternative that's stable, that's hygienic, and connected to services. And based on our outreach, we made over 600 contacts to people currently living in unsanctioned camps. We believe this is center of target. And just one boring data fact, 8 out of 10 said they would not go to an indoor congregate shelter, 8 out of 10. 6 out of 10 said they would go to an encampment like this.
I also wanted to add, a part of our task as the provider is to make the place as attractive as possible, so that people want to be there. And what we found is that it's really based on word of mouth. The reason why we got to 0% vacancy rate and one of the most sought after shelters that people, continuously for all of our shelters is because people talk and people know how they're treated. They know about the culture in a place. And so what's important is that you do a great job and people hear about it. It's safe, they treat you right. And for some of the folks that are on the fence, we've driven people there and said, hey, come take a look, come talk to people there. And so I think the way you get people to want to be there is by creating a place where people want to be and sustaining that. And that's something we work really, really hard to do. Because if a place is so bad that people would prefer to live in an underpass or along, in any kind of area where they don't have services and they don't have community and toilets and food and these kinds of things, then you got to really look at the places that they're saying no to, right? And so I think you can create places where people want to be. And we've done that over and over. And it's really not rocket science. It's really saying, what would I want for myself? What would I want for my loved ones if they were in this situation? And working with every resource you have to really create a welcoming place where people want to be and they feel safe to be. So a lot of that burden is on us to create that place.
Thank you for that. Mayor Wheeler, we have to cut you loose. You have a budget session for the next couple of hours that.
Could I propose something?
Yeah.
And yes, I shouldn't say unfortunately, I love budget hearings, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of questions we haven't answered and I want to answer them. So can we do this, Cody? Is there some way we can capture these questions and answer them in writing and post the answers somewhere so people can access them? Is there, what's the best way to do that?
Yes, so we can use the questions that have already been submitted through the Q&A function, and we can follow up that way. You can also email us, mayorwheeler@portlandoregon.gov. We can connect that way individually. We can add certain information to our Q&A on the mayor's website under the temporary alternative shelter site tab. And then next week, we'll have a little bit more time. We don't have a budget session next week, so we can engage further next week as well. But yeah, we'll follow up with the questions that have already been typed in and asked. And then if you have any other follow-ups, the email again is mayorwheeler@portlandoregon.gov, and we'll work to get those answered. Again, this is just the beginning of a conversation. This site is not finalized. We're moving towards, hopefully getting this developed, but we want to engage and we want to build these connections first. There's been a lot of questions also about schools and children. And so it's clear that we need to, do some separate engagement, I think, with that sector as well. So
thank you. And Cody, I'm sorry because I'm 4 minutes late to preside over council for the budget session. But I want to thank everybody for being here. And Cody's going to tell everybody if you want to come back on Thursday, we have a little more time planned, and I'd welcome people to return. But in the meanwhile, we'll try to answer as many questions as we can in writing as well. Thank you all for your time, and thanks to Urban Alchemy and the mayor's team. Thank you all for being here tonight. I appreciate it.
thanks, Mayor. Yes, I'll just reiterate. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will follow up on your questions. Send us an email. We'll be back on Thursday, and then we will provide additional opportunities to connect. So this is not just a one and done situation. We'll be open to connect throughout this entire process. So we just really appreciate the engagement today. There's some really good questions. It's important for us to hear your thoughts as well as we develop this. So it's really helpful to hear your feedback. Anybody else have anything to say? Or
yeah, Cody, I would just say, so Thursday it's again at 5:30. So if you'd like to come back, and then also we'll take a look at those questions in the Q&A, and then we'll be continuously adding more FAQs to our website, just as more questions come up and more information is understood, and we're developing this plan in real time. So please keep checking the website if you have questions. We have a lot of information on there as well.
Great. All right. Thank you guys so much for attending today. Really appreciate it.